Hi, welcome to this screencast on my tooling for maintaining a common place. I'm Soren Bjornstad, and this screencast goes with a blog post that I'm currently writing on how and why to create a common place. My common place is called Random Thoughts, and I have tooling associated with it that I've created. So I thought some people might be interested in seeing exactly how my system works. The purpose of this post is not to teach you to replicate my system exactly. Probably you will want to do something slightly different. My system is maybe more complicated than you want at all, and probably more complicated than you want to start out with. This is also somewhat technical. This is all Linux-based, involving the Vim text editor and some other custom applications. However, if that does sound like something you are interested in, perhaps this will be interesting to take a look at. So I am going to start out by creating a version of the random thoughts file which contains only the public entries. That way we can play around with it as much as we want without me having to worry that something I don't want to share with the entire internet gets in this screencast. So we're just going to hop over to our location where I keep the, Nothing ever works during demos, not even the file browser, apparently. Here we go, random thoughts, and we're gonna stop here, and we're going to, first we're going to rtgrep-p.star random thoughts to rtdemo.txt, and then we'll move this away to an original file, and we'll put the demo back to random thoughts. We'll see how rtgrep works in a little bit. It's just a tool for filtering the random thoughts file. And the reason we have to actually move this over the original one is that some of my tooling expects the file to be in a particular location, and it's just easier to copy it there than to change that tooling. So now we can open up this file. We can see that it starts with public entry number 0 and runs through public entry number 11,851. You can see that we've got some nice syntax highlighting here. I have a custom Vim plugin that does syntax highlighting and some of the other features that we will be looking at. Let me just call out a few features of the file format here. This is just a custom text file format that is consistent across the file, and so it can be parsed by various tooling. We have an ID number here. These are sequential numbers running from 1, or actually 0, which you can see here's the just the explanation of what random thoughts is for the public version. The first actual item starts with number 1, and you may notice some gaps in here. Like here, it goes from 11,843 to 11,846. In the main source, there would be private entries in the middle. So it might look something like 11,844, 11,845, and there would be some stuff associated with that, right? So the @ sign, as you may have surmised from that, means this is a public entry. The hash sign means that it is a private entry. There are also dates in here, which you can see highlighted in a different color, and I'm not particular about getting the exact date for every entry, but I like to have a rough notion of about when I added something. So typically, once every week or two, whenever I remember to insert a date, I will just quickly insert a date above the first entry of that date. There are also sources. The exactness to which I specify sources varies. In some cases, there's an exact URL for it. This is the blog post or the Wikipedia article or whatever. Or if it's a book, we might have, an author, a book title, a page number. Other times, it's a little more vague, like here, overheard at the campground, right? There's obviously not a super precise reference that I can provide for that because there's not, a website or a book where that information is kept. But there are also times where, for instance, here I just cited the author, Kevin Underhill. Oftentimes with web sources, if you don't really think you're probably going to need to go point to the URL, I tend to just leave it out because I know that I can simply, copy a few of these words and paste them into Google in quotation marks, and I'll land at exactly that page. I'm not aiming for full academic citations here. I'm just aiming for enough to be useful to me if I end up needing an academic citation for some reason, as described right there, I can go find the source and make up the citation from there. Another thing that we have here is references and hashtags. So hashtags I use to kind of categorize entries. So for instance, I maintain quotations of funny things that I've overheard in different places. And so putting in the hashtag overheard means that I can quickly find all of the things that have been overheard. We'll see how that works in a minute here. Similarly, there are cases where, let's see if I can find one. There's a number in here. For instance, here's one, number 10081, and you can use this to refer to other entries if they kind of connect in some way that's not along a particular category dimension, like with a hashtag. So you can refer specifically to one item. There's also a backlink. So that's written in braces here, BL and the number. That just means a reverse link. So in entry 11826, right, I linked to 11483. And so now here in 11483, I say, oh, well, we were linked to from 11826. This is very much the sort of tooling that you get in tools like TiddlyWiki or Roam Research, where you're just kind of getting the full picture in both directions easily. One other piece of syntax highlighting is dialogues. Let's see if we can find one here. So this is just if there's a conversation between multiple people and you want to list them somehow. I don't know what to search for. Here's one, right? So we get the separate color here ahead of each person's statement. There's also a scratch area. The scratch area is missing from this one because we trimmed it out with rtgrep, but I'm just going to write in the scratch area because this is exactly what it looks like. In the private one, we can see that it popped our syntax highlighting there for us. And the scratch area is just used if I'm working on something else and I just need to hold on to some text for a little bit, but I don't actually want to keep it as a permanent part of the log. I can quickly paste it in here. This is the kind of thing that you might just open a new file in your text editor or word processor normally and paste some text in there and work with there. But since I always keep the random thoughts file open on my desktop, it's just kind of convenient to merge those things together into one window. It's just one fewer thing to worry about. I do publish this to randomthoughts.sorenbjornstad.com, so let's just take a look at what that looks like, right? As you can see, it's basically exactly the same format over here. It's just got a different color scheme. I actually generate this through Vim using an unusual feature called 2HTML that not a whole lot of people know about. I'll show you quickly how that works later. You can also point directly to a specific item using an HTML or a URL anchor. So I can say, number 222, and it will start my browser window right up there so that I can include a link directly to a specific item from somewhere else on the web. For instance, in my Zettelkasten, we might have, let's do a find. Just pick one random here. Here we go. So you can see that there's a random thoughts 7433, and if you look down in the status bar there at the bottom, you can see that it's got that hash 7433 after it. Let's see kind of what it would look like to actually make an entry or two. So I just closed the browser. Let's open it up again. Let's go to my blog, and let's suppose that I've been reading my own blog because I don't know what I wrote on my own blog. And I come down here and let's see, I find something that really strikes me as particularly insightful. How about this? Few authors will complain if asked to create a table of contents. So I can copy that. I come over to my random thoughts file and I hit --. Hold on a second. Let me give you, since we're using Vim and it's got all sorts of blind keystrokes you can't see that do important things, let me give you a display of the keystrokes that I'm actually providing here. So I'm going to type --. Dash is my local leader in Vim, which is kind of the set of functions that belong to a particular file type. And you can see that it has created this number 11852 down here, which is the very next item there. Now I don't actually have to be in at the end of the file to do this. I can be 23% through the file, right, just way up here, and I can go --, and there I am, number 11852. So all I really have to do is focus the window, and I'm set. So I'm got dropped into insert mode here. I'm going to do quotation mark, and I'll paste in, oops. Let me highlight over here again. I did primary selection, but changed in the meantime. There we go. Few authors will complain if asked to create a table of contents. I might want to add a source here too, so let's click the link button to get a permalink directly to this section. I'll copy that, and I'll do a paste from clipboard over here, and there's our entry. I might read some more, and I could say here, I don't know. The inspect pane shows the source and volume the occurrence is found in. It's not even as good as the other one as a quote. But we'll go ahead and paste this one in. And we have this. And let's suppose this is actually in a different section, but let's suppose it was in the same section. One kind of handy thing I can do here is just use ibid, which means the same source. It's commonly used in lists of references in various citation formats. And this will just kind of make it easier to get the same thing over and over again. And my rtgrep tool will actually recognize that and copy in the source from the previous one, so we'll still be able to find things based on that source if we want to find all occurrences of that source. Let's just go ahead and save this file. Another thing that we might want to do is reference. So let's suppose this part over here is about tabularium, right, where this came in. Let's say, let's just add a little commentary on this, right? So that might be something that I would do to provide some context. I think this is a really awesome feature, and I should try to use it myself more. So in addition to the quote, we might want to add a little bit of further notes to our commonplace down there. Now let's suppose that I remembered something else about tabularium, so I'm just going to do a search backwards in Vim and see if I can find something good. Okay, here's one. It's not really related, right? But let's suppose that it was actually very relevant. So what I can do is come to the ID number of it, and I can hit local leader R, and that's going to create a bidirectional reference between them directly. So we can see that now it's got the number 8412, which was what we were looking at before. And I actually have a tags file set up for this. So if I press Control right bracket in order to jump to tag, it's going to bring us right up here to 8412. And you can see that it also added here a backlink to 11853. If I follow that, here I am down at 11853. And I can use Control T also to jump back in that list of followed links. Another thing we might want to do is add the date, like I was saying. So, currently it's 8/12, and the last date I have here is August 9th. So it might be a good time to add the date again. I can just come up here, and I actually have a global mapping in my vimrc that's leader D. If I press that, it's just going to grab the date. You can see here that it's actually running a filter and just using the operating system's date command. So there I've got the date in there, and if I want, I can add a blank line above it to smooth it out. So that's kind of how we edit. It is very simple. Certainly if I wanted to come up and change something else, I could always just do this. So update. I still think this is a good poem, right? If I am going to change something that's in a previous entry that's more complicated than, say, fixing a typo or something, I will usually try to write that after update, just so that I can see that it wasn't part of the original entry and I changed it later. And occasionally, if it's the date of the update is important, or like how far off it is, I might say update 2021-08-12 to give a little bit more context there. Oops. Let's talk now about how we can search through this. So obviously one simple thing that we can do is just do a simple incremental search through the document. So let's suppose I remember something, I think it's from a Douglas Adams book. It's about fire that can be fitted nasally. So let's search for fitted nasally. Here we are already. Full text search works very well on Commonplace when you can come up with a couple of words from the quotation. So we can see here it's from Restaurant at the End of the Universe. We can also see other relevant quotes from Restaurant at the End of the Universe that surround it. Well, I don't know if they're relevant. They could potentially be relevant, right? We can also search for hashtags. So, for instance, we talked about the overheard hashtag earlier. Another interesting one is unusual sentences. This is just odd sentences that I came across that are probably never been used before and are kind of amusing. So I can do hashtag unusual sentences. And you'll notice that I had to put the backslash in front of the hash. That's just because it has a special meaning in Vim regular expressions. and I can say next and come on to more of them. So that's all very simple. I can use regexes of arbitrary complexity. I can also search within sources specifically simply by beginning my search with --. So let's suppose that I want to find everything written by blogger Scott Alexander. So I'm going to do Scott Alexander. There needs to be a slash before that in Vim syntax. And I also, in addition to citing him by author's name, I might cite him by the name of one of his blogs. So let's put those in. We have Slate Star Codex, the newer one, Astral Codex 10. Maybe I abbreviated one of those. And there's my regex. And we can now see if we flip through these that we've got ones that match various ones. Down here we've got an SSC. Here we've got a Slate Star Codex. If I keep going, there's a couple Scott Alexanders. There's a couple ASCs. So this is all very easy and just basic searching through a file. However, it does have the disadvantage that we have to continually press next and scroll through it. Sometimes it might be nicer to get a full list of the filters. So this is why I developed rtgrep, which is a Rust program. It's typically not public, but it's currently not public, but I do plan to make it public at some point or another. So if we just look at rtgrep, this is the random thought search utility. As the grep suggests, it works very similarly to grep. It has the same command line syntax in terms of regular expression and some files to search over. And many of the flags even line up, for instance, ignore case, count, no file name, and so on. So if we wanted to, let's go back to the unusual sentences example, just because it's a simpler search to do. So let's do an rtgrep search for hashtag unusual sentences, and we'll do it in our random thoughts file. Boom. And we can see that a list of items tagged with hashtag unusual sentences come up. Now, you might also be saying, well, this is kind of annoying because I have to come out to a separate terminal and type in rtgrep and remember the file name, and we don't get syntax highlighting. Yep, I agree with that too. So I've added a Vim mapping in here for local leader G. And you can see that now it's prompting me down here what I want to search for. So I can search for my hashtag unusual sentences. And this is actually going to pop up a scratch buffer, filter the rtgrep command through there, and pull the results into the buffer. And so now we've got our nice syntax highlighting, and it's right here in a vertical split. And if I want it to be a horizontal split, I can, capital J, I can use whatever normal Vim functions I could use to work with that. I could even, hide it, and then I could find it in a separate buffer later, and so on and so forth. So that's rtgrep. We already talked about tags a little bit in that we can jump to specific numbers that we find references to, right? There's jump to 8412, there's jump back to the source 11853. Another thing that we can do is if we get quoted a particular number, let's say I want to go to entry 5000, I can type TA, which is short for tag, 5000, and we can hop over to entry 5000 right here. We can also, there are also date tags. So supposing I want to find something kind of close to, let's say, April 15th, 2016. So I can do TA. The trick here is we type in a D for date, 2016-04, and we can tab complete this. We can see that there's dates for the 11th and for the 18th. So let's hop to the 11th. And here we are at April 11th, 2016. And, if we scroll down a little bit, we'll find where our April 18th, there it is down there. And so we know that the stuff in between these is probably close to April 15th. That is kind of all that there is from the user interface perspective out here. I'm going to look just briefly at the actual tooling that backs this up, just in case you're curious, but you certainly don't have to stay watching that if you don't want to. So we can look at our Vim plugin. Let's find the folder there. There's a syntax highlighting file here. It's a pretty simple syntax highlighting file. If you use a different editor and you're familiar with how to write syntax highlighting files, you ought to be able to translate something like this into that pretty easily. Again, this isn't public yet, but I'm hoping to publish it soon. So if you're itching to play with a system like this and you want the source code, let me know. Just send me an email, contact@sorenbjornstad.com, and I can hook you up with some parts of that. I've already gotten at least one request from somebody about this previously. There's also a plugin file, and this has got a couple of mappings in it. Let's unfold here. So there we go. There's a mapping for the dash dash for the get next index number. You can see this is kind of a complicated gibberish executable line noise Vim mapping, but it works fantastically. There's comments here if you want to understand what it's actually trying to do. Similarly, down here we've got this one for the copy the reference to the latest entry. The tags file, ctags file, is regenerated every time we save the file, so that makes sure that it's pretty much always up to date. The only time when a tag might not be there is if you were currently working on a new entry and you hadn't saved yet. And in that case, it's pretty unlikely that you'd want to hop back there unless you're checking to make sure that your reference worked. And if you get invalid tag, you just save and it'll work. This uses this thing called update rttags file, so maybe we can look at that. Let's figure out where that actually is. In PowerScript update rttags file. Let's look at that. Oops. There we go. So this is a Python file. It's just going to retrieve the random thoughts file here and a tags file. And then based on a couple of regular expressions, we're going to find all of the entry matches. So this is the line where it begins with @ hash mark and a series of numbers followed by a period. And it's going to create a tag for that in the list, and then also similarly for lines that match dates. Ctags file doesn't need to be sorted, so once it writes it out, it's also going to call sort. We call sort rather than sorting it ahead of time ourselves, because it actually turns out to be faster, because sort's happening in C, and it's highly optimized compared to Python. And since this does run every time we save, the faster we can get it running, the better. It runs in under half a second, even on it's about a 2.5 megabyte file with 11,000 entries, 500,000 words. So it does not require a whole lot of processing power there when we're careful to simplify it. Let's find the value of this environment variable here, this rttags file, just so that you can see what that tags file actually looks like here. This is a standard ctags file format, but in the first column we've got the actual tag name. So this is when you press your control right bracket over a word in the document, or you type in that tag or TA in command mode. It's going to search based on that, and then there's the file name and the line number within that file that you jump to at that point. So very simple there. And we actually load that tags file so we can use it. And then lastly, there's this function for rtgrep, which is just going to query what you want to search for, create that scratch buffer, and then actually call rtgrep in there. rtgrep is just a Rust program. There's not a whole lot to show here. I don't actually know very much Rust. This was kind of a project to learn Rust, but we've got this. It's probably only a couple hundred lines of code. I'm going to scroll through all of it right now. As you can see, it's a pretty simple, straightforward tool. Like I said, I'll publish this at some point soon too. Lastly, you might be wondering how I actually generate that randomthoughts.sorenbjornstad.com website. There is a simple build script here called build.sh, very creative. You can actually find this one in the GitHub repository that backs up my random thoughts. So if we go look at that, I think that's the name, maybe not. Maybe it's got a hyphen in it. There we go. Build.sh over here. Like I said, this is actually going to, it's first going to use rtgrep to filter out only the public entries, and then it's going to actually just call Vim and run it in X mode, that's -E without the visual part, and run this series of commands, which uses this syntax to html.vim, which actually generates an HTML file, and then from there we simply use Beautiful Soup to modify the DOM of that HTML file just a little bit. We want to change the title of the document, and then we also want to add those anchor tags so that when we go to randomthoughts.sorenbjornstad.com/#234, we jump to entry 234. And we do that by finding this span with a syntax highlighting class of preproc, which is what's used for those numbers, and then figure out the number and add an ID tag to that span. I guess I called it an anchor tag, but it's not an anchor tag, it's just an ID on the span. that is pretty much all of the tooling for Random Thoughts. It's developed over about 12 years and works very well. There's not actually a lot to it, though. It's a pretty simple system. So my recommendation, if you're trying to create tooling like this for yourself, is to start with the minimum thing that works. Just start with a text file. Make the syntax simple and consistent across all of your entries. Make sure that, as I will talk about in the post, you include an ID number so that you can reference things back and forth. That's the one thing that's really hard to fix afterwards. I didn't start with ID numbers until I had like 4,000 entries, and I had to go through and manually number all 4,000 of them, which was not a lot of fun. So I do highly recommend that you start with those ID numbers so that you can reference things. Aside from that, exactly what you want to store and how you want to format it is kind of up to you. This is very much something that can easily be built on incrementally, since it's just a text file format and some scripts that run over it. Hope this was interesting. Thanks for watching.